there is definitely a sense of normalcy returning in the MLS world because we got 12 games that is going to be happening between Thursday through Sunday, as we're going to get 3 games that's going to be happening on Thursday, 4 games that's going to be happening on Friday and Saturday, and 1 game that is going to be happening on Sunday, which is the Cascadia Derby. And the other thing that makes things feels back to normal is the fact that the prediction box is back, and once again I'm going to have the issue of potentially have to watch 3 or 4 games at a time, and that I am definitely not going to be as much detail in terms of some of these games review as I would do in the past, because during this tournament, and you notice all my reviews has been much longer, that's because I've been able to kind of just only watch one match and only had to kind of focus on that, so that I of course could took down more notes. But now, since I have to keep track of, like, let's say 3 or even 4 games in a row that is going to be starting around the same time, it is going to be much tougher in terms of keeping notes, and at times I do have to unfortunately make the sacrifice of maybe not keep an eye on a specific game just because of either one game is more exciting or the fact that one of my other team is playing in that game and I want to keep a very close eye on it. But with that being said, let us actually begin. And, you know, this is also technically Heineken Rivalry Week because pretty much we have almost every single rivalry happening during this weekend. And we start off with that rivalry talk by talking about the New York Derby, or shall I say the Red Bull Arena Derby, because both the Redbulls and NYCFC, at least for this season, is going to be playing at Red Bull Arena for their home game. So technically, I think this is the first time in MLS history where both teams are actually playing a home game, and that both teams are technically the home side heading into this one. Now, the Redbulls, of course, their record is 2-1-2, and by the way, these records are updated depending on how each of these teams have done in the MLS's back tournament group stage, or in the case of FC Dallas and Nashville, it's updated based on the 2 games that they have already been played. So you can definitely see that each of these teams have 5 games under the belt, except for Dallas and Nashville, who of course currently have 4 games that is under their belt. But for the Red Bulls, they currently have a record of 2-1-2, while NYCFC is 1-0-4. This game is going to be kicking off on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time. The Red Bulls, of course, got eliminated in the group stage, while NYCFC was eliminated in the quarterfinal and was eliminated, I believe, was it the Union or the Portland Timbers that they got eliminated? I think it was the Timbers that eliminated them in the quarterfinal of the MLS's back tournament. The last 5 head-to-head matchup in this New York Derby, it was NYCFC with a 2-1 win against the Red Bulls in this last rivalry match, before it was the Red Bulls winning 2-1 against NYCFC. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams before NYCFC won again 1-0 against the Red Bulls, and then the Red Bulls destroying NYCFC 4-0 in this game. And historically, the Red Bulls has been the better side in terms of this Hudson River Derby, or now it's called the Red Bull Arena Derby. But I'm going to have to go with NYCFC as the team that I picked to win this game, mainly because, you know, the Red Bulls, they are going through a transitional period right now, and that I have a feeling for this could be a bit of a rough season for the Red Bulls, and this might be a season that I think Sporting KC fans kind of suffered last season, where this might be finally the year the streak unfortunately come to an end for the Red Bulls in terms of their playoff streak, because you can definitely see that some of their players on this team is moving on. One of those players that just moved on from this team that's been a long time Red Bull player is Alex Muyl, and that they are started to make a couple of interesting signings, to say the least, to try to maybe help sort out this team. Whereas if you're NYCFC, we saw, at least in the knockout stage, that this team definitely had potential of being a team that finished first in the Eastern Conference, but obviously that has a lot to do of whether or not if they can, of course, do that. I mean, right now, Ronnie Delia, you know, he's kind of in a tricky situation where he hasn't really been got off to a good start, but at least he did take that team to the quarterfinal, and at least for once were able to get a rare win in a knockout stage kind of competition. So maybe they can carry that momentum heading into this game. And that you got to also remember, NYCFC, I think some of their players should be healthy coming into this game. A couple of those players like Maxi Morales should be available in this game, and that he was really, I think the player that they missed a lot during the tournament, and that you can definitely see the difference between him being in this team and the difference between him not with this team is definitely huge. So yeah, I'm gonna give NYCFC the edge in this one, and that they are gonna win this Red Bull Arena Derby against their rival, the Redbulls. Now, moving on in terms of the next match, excuse me, is the Columbus Crew and the Chicago Fire. Now, the Columbus Crew, obviously, they were probably the most impressive team in the knockout stage of the MLS's back tournament, as they were the only team able to get all 3 games with a win and improve their record to 4-1-0, and they're actually tied with Sporting KC as the team that has the most points so far in the regular season. While the Chicago Fire, after kind of a false hope game against the Seattle Sounders that they won, they would fall their next 2 games in the knockout round, and now their record is 1-1-3. This game is going to be also taking place on Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Like I said, Columbus is currently first in the East and are tied with Sporting KC in the Supporters' Shield standing, while the Chicago Fire is currently 12th in the Eastern Conference. The Crew unfortunately got eliminated in the round of 16 by Minnesota, while Chicago, they got eliminated in the group stage, and this one is a pretty easy one to predict. I expect Columbus to win this, and you know, it was unfortunate that they of course got knocked out in the round of 16, and that, you know, they were of course facing a Loons team that was just able to outlast them in a penalty kick shootout. Like, anytime when a game goes to a penalty kick shootout, it's always going to be tough to be the one that comes out as the losing end of the PK shootout, because after all, a shootout is pretty much a coin flip up until that point. But I thought when you look at how they play in the group stage in this tournament, they look clearly like the best team in the league, and that this is definitely a team that, as I said before, not only the fact that I think they're no longer kind of a dark horse team, but this team can really challenge for those top spot in the Eastern Conference. And, you know, they can of course start that challenge by facing a Chicago team that clearly is still trying to figure things out in the early part of the season. I mean, it's been a rough start for Raphael Wiki and his team, and that, you know, you can clearly see that the players and the tactics that he's trying to implement the team hasn't really worked out yet, and that, you know, as long as if he can of course eventually work that tactics out, then maybe they can have a shot against Columbus. But it's pretty clear that Columbus are heavy favorites in this game, and I expect them to get the full 3 points in this one. Now, that being said, moving on into the next match is New England versus the Philadelphia Union, and these next couple of games are not going to be the rivalry game. As we get to the second board, this is where all the rivalry is going to be happening in this week, so-called Heineken Rivalry Week. But this game is actually a rematch of the round of 16 matchup in the MLS's back tournament between the New England Revolution and the Philadelphia Union. New England currently have a record of 1-3-1, and the Union currently have a record of 2-2-1. This game also is going to be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. New England is currently 9th in the Eastern Conference, and I also just double-check in terms of the expanded playoffs and how it actually works. Well, basically, in the East, there's going to be 10 teams that is going to be moving on into the playoffs, while in the West, there's only going to be 8 teams that is going to be moving on into the West. Now, I definitely did not like the fact that they gave more teams to make it to the playoffs in the East compared to the West. Like, I understand the East have 2 more teams compared to the Western Conference, but consider the strength of each conference. It's pretty clear that the Western Conference have more competitive team than the Eastern Conference had, and I just have a feeling that unfortunately there are going to be times at the end of the season where I won't be surprised if there's going to be a couple of Western Conference teams that just miss out on that 8th and final spot in the playoffs. That is not going to be happy that they missed out, and that they would argue themselves that if they were in the Eastern Conference, they probably would have made it into the playoffs, because clearly the West is much better than what the Eastern Conference is, and that there's going to be a case where some of those teams in the lower part of the standings that just made it to the playoffs, they probably would have not made it in the Western Conference if they are, of course, in the West. And knowing the fact that now for the rest of the season there's no interconference kind of matchup, this does make things a little bit unbalanced, and now how Western Conference teams going to face much tougher opponent than, let's say, an Eastern Conference had. But unfortunately, this is the way we're going to have to work out. Like, we're going to unfortunately have this situation when we decide to resume the regular season, and knowing the fact that MLS is trying their best to restrict travels throughout the rest of the season because of the pandemic. This is, unfortunately, is going to be a situation that we are going to have to live through. But that being said, going back to this one between the New England Revolution and the Philadelphia Union, as I mentioned, the Revs are currently 9th in the East and technically would be in the playoffs if the season ends today. While the Union is currently 4th in the Eastern Conference, the Revs, of course, got eliminated in the round of 16 in the hands of the Philadelphia Union, while the Union got eliminated in the semifinal. Now, I have a feeling this could be a draw between both of these teams, because, you know, I'm pretty sure New England would want to get some revenge over the Union in this game, but, you know, I think the Union should have enough to maybe get a point out of this game. And it's also going to be interesting to see how these teams that plays game away, and how is the home field advantage is going to be favorites in some of these teams, because we talked about before how home field advantage in MLS is still pretty big, and that a lot of teams tends to do much better at home than compared to what they do when they play away. Well, now there is no fans in the stands, and you know, we've seen other leagues when games are played behind closed door, home field advantage doesn't seem like it's a thing anymore, and that this is really kind of the time where it's really about who actually has the best team and who can actually kind of play in an environment where it feels like a training session whatsoever. I mean, when we watch some of these games, and depending on how each of those local regional network, or depending on if FS1 is going to continue with those fake crowd noises, these players are not going to really hear any fans in the stands whatsoever. So I wonder if these home teams are going to have the same advantage that they, of course, will always have when there is fans in the stands. But that being said, not every game's potentially is going to be playing without fans, because we said before, there are going to be some markets where fans could be allowed back into the stands depending on if the local government decide to do that. So for New England, you know, they have a solid home record, but could that continue if they are playing in front of an empty Gillette Stadium against a very good Philadelphia Union team that had a very solid MLS's back tournament? But that being said, moving on, in terms of the next match, is FC Cincinnati versus DC United. So FC Cincinnati were one of the teams that feature on my surprise list, as they were able to somehow win 2 out of their 3 games in the MLS's back tournament group stage, and got themselves now to 2-0-3, while DC United currently have a record of 1-2-2. This game is also going to be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. So yeah, that's now pretty much, well, actually, we're now moving into Friday, as I pretty much finished with the Thursday game. And I know on Friday, as I mentioned before, there's going to be 4 games that's going to be start right around the same times, and it is going to be incredibly hard to try to pay attention to all 4 of these games at the same time. Now, FC Cincinnati currently is 8th in the East, while DC United is currently 10th in the East. FC Cincinnati, of course, despite the fact that they had an amazing run in the MLS's back tournament, they unfortunately were knocked out in the round of 16 on a penalty shootout against the Portland Timbers, while DC United, despite the resilience that they shown in the group stage, ultimately was eliminated in the group stage after they lost to the Montreal Impact. And this is kind of a little bit of a tough one to call, but I'm going to say it's going to be a draw between both of these teams, and it's not going to be one of these games where there's going to be a lot of action that is going to happen. Like, I have a feeling in this game, FC Cincinnati and what Jaap Stam is going to do is that he's going to try to do the same thing that he did in the MLS's back tournament and enforce it in the regular season, which is they're going to be a compact kind of team and trying to counter teams and take advantage of mistakes that teams make in the midfield so that they can, of course, score goals. And for DC United, we know how much they struggle in terms of trying to score goals. So imagine if they have all the possession and they're going to be facing against an FC Cincinnati team that is not going to give you a sniff of space to trying to operate on the attack. I do really fear in terms of DC chances in this game. And saying that, I probably maybe should have changed this prediction to an FC Cincinnati win, because I have a feeling if there is going to be a goal in this game, which, you know, this not only could be a low-scoring game, but I think this could be in a sense that there could be a scoreless game out of this, considered both attack is not like the most impressive in the league. But whoever scored the first goal most likely might be on FC Cincinnati instead of DC United. And unless if DC United can finally wake up on the attack, and all those signings that they made during the offseason can finally wake up in this game against FC Cincinnati, I mean, I'm just going to say this is going to be a draw, and that if you want some action and you want to see goals in this game, yeah, this probably might not be the game you want to choose. And you might think about looking at other games that probably will feature more goals than what we're going to see in this one between Cincinnati and DC United. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the battle of the top two team in the Western Conference. So, despite the fact that we pretty much have a lot of rivalry, like El Trafico, the Texas Derby, the Rocky Mountain Cup, and even the Cascadia Derby that's going to be happening this week, I think this game is no doubt going to be easily overlooked and probably the most underrated game of this week, because this is a battle between two teams that is in the top two of the Western Conference, as I said, and both of these teams did meet in the MLS's back tournament, and it was definitely an amazing game, at least in a Loons fan's perspective, seeing them able to score 2 late goals in stoppage time to pretty much stole 3 points away from Sporting KC in this one. And that really was actually the only loss that they suffered, which, again, I need to update this. Their record is not 4-1-0, it's actually 4-0-1, because that's the only loss that they suffer. Whereas Minnesota, still unbeaten in the regular season, if you count those knockout games and don't count that we did lose to Orlando City in the semifinal. And this game is going to be taking place at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific on a Friday, the same time as this one between Cincinnati and DC United. As I said, the Loons currently second in the West, while SKC tied with Columbus in the Supporters' Shield standings at the top, and are also at the top of the Western Conference. And as I mentioned, Minnesota has already beat Sporting KC 2-1 in the group stage of the MLS's back tournament. And I'm also going to say this game is going to end in a draw. Now, I was very tempting to put Minnesota in this prediction box, and that if I did kind of put them in the prediction box, you might say that I was kind of being a little bit biased as a Loons fan. But I'm going to say it's a draw, but I can definitely see Minnesota win this one against Sporting KC. But that all depend on if Minnesota does have Romain Métanire and Kevin Molino back 100% healthy in this game. I mean, you know, those two guys were definitely the keystone player. They're both on the defense and on the attack. And if we want to have a chance to win this game, both of those players are going to be healthy. Now, we already know that Ike Opara will not be playing in this game, and he's going to be out for the first couple of the games, which is not a big issue because, so far this back line that Minnesota has, and I don't even want to call it a makeshift back line. I mean, the back line that it's been shown throughout this tournament without Ike Opara is just as solid when we actually had him in the back four too. And again, this really all depends on whether or not if Metanier and Molino will be back in the starting 11, because if they do, then Minnesota does have a huge chance to be able to beat Sporting KC. And let's also not to mention the fact that they rarely lose at Allianz Field. Like, they are, if you want to talk about a team that is an absolute fortress at home, Minnesota is definitely that team. Although, again, as I said earlier about when I was previewing the New England versus Union game, does home field advantage even matter anymore now that no fans are going to be allowed to attend these games for the most part? And obviously, nobody's going to be attending this game at Allianz Field, as Minnesota just announced that, unfortunately, for the first part of the regular season, they're not going to be allowing fans to attend games at Allianz Field. But either way, I should expect this one to be a good game, and that I also could expect this one to have some goals to be scored. Both of these teams definitely are not shy away in terms of their goals scoring power. So this could be a very entertaining game, much more entertaining than what potentially an FC Cincinnati versus DC United game will produce. But yeah, moving on into the last game on this board is going to be the Texas Derby between the Houston Dynamo and FC Dallas. The Dynamo still searching for their first win, as they are now 0-3-2, while FC Dallas, of course, are now 1-2-1, coming off that 0-0 draw against Nashville, and then losing 1-0 on Wednesday against Nashville, which was the first time they were back playing competitive match in 5.5 months. This game is actually going to be kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time, and yeah, I'm not a big fan of this kickoff time, not only because it kind of disrupts in terms of these games that is kind of going to be kicking off right around the same time, but the fact that this game is going to kick off at 7 o'clock in Houston, and usually games in Houston in August usually kick off at 8 o'clock, and for a good reason, because it is, if you thought Orlando in terms of this MLS's back tournament is a very bad place to play at during the summer, you haven't seen Houston in terms of the weather in August. Like, it is equally, if not worse, than Orlando kind of weather with the hot and humid kind of ways. But I guess maybe this shouldn't be an issue for both of these teams, because both of these teams kind of play in the similar climate. And obviously Dallas kind of experienced that when they were playing their first game back against Nashville, where they were literally playing 100-degree heat against Nashville. Houston, of course, currently are 11th in the West, while Dallas is currently 10th in the West, but they do have a game in hand over the team that is above them. Last 5 head-to-head Texas Derby, it was a 5-1 win for FC Dallas over the Dynamo, before it was a 2-1 win for the Dynamo versus Dallas, although that probably could have been a 2-2 draw if Dallas didn't have a disallowed goal late in that game. There was a 4-2 win for Dallas over Houston, before it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and a 3-3 draw between both of these teams. So something tells me when you look at the past couple of meetings, there's definitely going to be goals that is going to be scoring in this game. Although I'm not so sure if you are talking in an FC Dallas standpoint, where these first 2 games, boy oh boy, they are struggling in terms on the attacking end. And because of that, I have to give Houston the edge out of this one, because I think Houston, in terms of their attack, is much better than what Dallas is in right now. Although, I will say this, Dallas, they have made a signing during these last couple of days, or actually it happened yesterday, where they signed a very promising young Brazilian goalkeeper out of Gamero, and that I was kind of surprised the fact that they decided to not keep Jimmy Maurer, because I thought Maurer looked impressive in the first 2 games. And the Dynamo basically kind of responds by making a couple of their signings too. They of course got Zahibo and also got a striker from LA Galaxy. The Zahibo deal, of course, they got him from New England. Well, they actually got rid of Tommy McNamara, which I know a lot of Dynamo fans are really relieved to see McNamara not no longer with the Houston Dynamo. Consider, I've heard a lot of Dynamo fans complain that Mechamir is one of the worst players to ever put on that Dynamo shirt. But either way, I think Houston does have the advantage of this game. Again, this is a very good team at home, and they tend to not lose a lot of Texas Derby when they are playing at home. So yeah, I expect they of course are going to win this game compared to a Dallas team that this is only their third games back, and knowing the fact that it's clear that they're still not up to speed, that is another big advantage that Dynamo will have in this game. But that being said, I am now going to switch the board and look at the last 6 games that is going to be happening during this week. But yeah, moving on. And what do you know? The next match that I get to preview is a match that just finished an hour and a half ago between TFC versus the Vancouver Whitecaps, which TFC absolutely dismantled the Whitecaps by winning 3-0 against them. And now both of these teams get to play again each other on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. With that win, TFC improved their record to 3-3-0, and they're currently second in the East, while Vancouver is currently 2-0-4, and they're just barely hanging on to that last spot of the playoffs in the Western Conference in 8th place. But judging by the way how they played tonight, yeah, something tells me they're not going to hang on to that last spot for very long, and that I'm really hoping this game Vancouver will show a little bit more effort and at least not just sit back and defend like all the time. I mean, if that's the tactics that Mark Dos Santos has put in this team, as I said in the review, this is going to be a long season for the Whitecaps. This is if that is the way they're going to do every single game, because that tactics clearly does not give you a lot of points. So with that being said, I'm still going to say Toronto is going to win this. I mean, unless if we're going to see Vancouver that just become completely rejuvenate in this game and completely change the way that they play in that game that just happened today, I just don't see how Toronto's not going to get another win, and that this could be another game where it's going to be like tonight, where it feels like a training session for them and a kind of a game to prepare them to play against some other opponents that probably might be tougher to face than the Vancouver Whitecaps that they are going to be facing on Friday. But that being said, moving on, in the next match is none other than El Trafico, also known as the media most favorite rivalry out of MLS. Like, seriously, the media always tends to hype up this rivalry, and that it seemed like they think that this is the best rivalry in MLS, even though, in my opinion, I always will say that Portland versus Seattle will be my favorite and best rivalry in MLS, mainly because there's more history, and there's actually a long history of hatred between Portland and Seattle, compared to the two LA team, which literally one of them just founded a couple of years ago, coming from the ashes of Chivas USA, and all of a sudden, they just become rival at each other. And something tells me this rivalry could be shifted once again into a time where it could be once again one-sided. And unfortunately for the Galaxy, that shift seems like it's going to be carried now to LAFC, where it seemed like now for the next couple of games in this El Trafico that LAFC could actually dominate this rivalry, because LAFC, despite the fact that they have a record of 2-3-0, no doubt about that they are going to be a team that's going to win more games and trying to climb their way back at the top of the Western Conference, while the Galaxy are still searching for their first win in this game, and they have a record of 0-2-3. The Galaxy currently last in the West, while LAFC currently 4th in the West. And the last 5 head-to-head matchup, as I said, we are starting to show a shift of power in terms of this El Trafico, because in the last match between both of these teams, LAFC absolutely demolished the Galaxy 6-2 in that game. And then it was a 5-3 win in the playoffs against the Galaxy, which was the first ever win, or a 5-3 win in favor of LAFC, which was the first time that LAFC actually won in an El Trafico, and what a great time to do it, in probably the most important time in this rivalry that is in the playoffs. Then it was a 3-3 draw between both of these teams before the Galaxy won 3-2 against LAFC, and then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, which that game is the only game where there is actually a low-scoring game, because for whatever reason, this game always tends to have a ton of fireworks, and that there is going to be a lot of goals that is going to score. Now, unfortunately, this game, even though I think there's going to be a lot of goals that's going to be scored, it's probably going to be in favor of LAFC, and that I have a feeling this game could really be very similar to what we saw in the MLS's back tournament, mainly because LAFC, we know how good they have came out of this MLS's back tournament, despite the fact that they did lose in the quarterfinal. And keep in mind, they're going to get Vela back in this team, so this team is going to be even stronger than what you saw in the MLS's back tournament. And consider the Galaxy, there's a question of whether or not if Chicharito is 100% fit. Same goes with Jonathan Dos Santos. This is basically going to be the team playing this El Trafico that is almost going to be the identical team that lost 6-2 against the Galaxy. So, without further ado, there is no doubt I have to pick LAFC in this one. Like, it's not just quality is overwhelmingly in favor of LAFC, but it's just the fact that the Galaxy are in clearly a transitional period right now, and they're trying their best in terms of repairing the damage that this team has with signing or actually rumored to get a winger from Benfica, and also potentially rumored to get a couple of defenders to help shape up their defense. But until then, yeah, this is going to be a rough one for the Galaxy, and that they will really hope that it can somehow look at the first couple of El Trafico, and somehow maybe if they can channel their inner Galaxy from the first couple of El Trafico where they were actually competing against LAFC, I can't see this one being anything close, and that LAFC should be able to comfortably win this game against the Galaxy. Now, moving on, in terms of the next match, is Nashville versus Atlanta. Boy, oh boy, it's been a while since both of these teams play. Remember how they played all the way back in the first game of the season, and that was the first ever matchup for Nashville SC in MLS? Well, ever since then, it seemed like when you look at the position that both of these teams are in, surprisingly, Nashville look like they have more promise than what Atlanta currently has. So Atlanta, obviously, their record is 2-0-3, and that 3 losses, of course, came in the MLS's back tournament knockout stage, or not the knockout stage, but the group stage, that is. While Nashville SC currently have a record of 1-1-2, and this game is going to be kicking off at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. Atlanta is currently 7th in the East, while Nashville is currently 11th in the East, but they have definitely started to try to climb themselves up the table with getting 4 points against FC Dallas in these last couple of days. Atlanta, of course, as I mentioned, all the way back in February when both of these teams were meeting each other for the very first time, they of course won 2-1 against Nashville, but it came in a very hefty price, because that was also the game that Josef Martinez would end up having a torn ACL, and pretty much his season was done, and pretty much that was one of the biggest reasons why Atlanta was so bad during the MLS's back tournament. Like, no doubt if Josef Martinez was on that Atlanta team in the MLS's back tournament, they would not go through the entire tournament without scoring a single goal. So, yeah, this is definitely a very tough one to predict. I'm going to say this one is going to be a draw between both of these teams, and this might be another one of these games where there's not going to be a lot of goals that is scored, because both of these teams don't necessarily have a very good attack. Although I know Atlanta are trying to, at least in some way, kind of get at least half of those goal productivity that Josef Martinez bring to this team in signing Cubo Torres. But we don't know if he can of course do what he did when he was with the Dynamo, and that of course was guarantee you maybe 10 goals a season. So yeah, I have a feeling this could be a kind of a low scoring game, and not to mention Nashville is a team that, in these first couple of games, they definitely have shown promise in terms of being one of the best defensive team, and a team that can definitely take advantage of mistake that the opposition make, but the only problem is they can't finish those. They can't punish those teams with the mistake that they made by scoring a goal against them. Like, this team still only have 2 goals to their names coming into this game, but at the same time, at least they get to play against an Atlanta team that basically don't have any goal scoring threat. Which makes me wonder, do they think about opening themselves up in this game against Atlanta, knowing the fact that maybe Atlanta doesn't have any goal scoring threat? Actually, you know what? That is not a great idea, because obviously we know Atlanta is going to potentially dominate possession, and somehow Pity Martinez and Ezekiel Barco might be showing up in this game, and maybe show why they probably would do better after a horror show that they had during the tournament. But they're going to have to face against the Nashville defense that has been very locked down for ever since they of course came back in the regular season after they were pretty much one of the 2 teams that got kicked out of the MLS's back tournament. But that being said, moving on in terms of the next game is going to be the first game of the, or not the first game, but the rematch of the first game of the MLS is back tournament between Inter Miami versus Orlando City, or you could call this the Floridian Derby, as both of these teams, of course, are based in Florida. Miami, of course, are the only team yet to register a point, and they're looking to try to get their first point on their 6th attempt. But if they want to do that, they have to face against an Orlando City team that currently have a record of 2-2-1, and they, of course, are fresh off of a finals appearance against the Portland Timbers, which unfortunately they just stumble at the final block and lose to the Timbers in the final. This game is going to be kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday, and this is also officially the first ever home game for Inter Miami, though unfortunately their first ever home game will not have anybody that is going to be attending them. So yeah, unfortunately Miami is not going to do what Louisville City did when they decided to open up their stadium for the first time and actually allow fans to attend their first ever home game at their new stadium. Although, you know, even though if there's going to be fans allowed in the stadium or not, I have a feeling if you look at this game, Orlando is definitely going to be the favorites coming into this one. Like, all the momentum that they, of course, had throughout this MLS's back tournament, and not to mention, they already beat Miami back in that first game of the MLS's back tournament, and Nani, of course, was the hero in that game by scoring a 96-minute winner to win 2-1 against them. No doubt about that Orlando City is going to be heavy favorites in this. And with that being said, I'm going to also go with Orlando City winning this one. Again, I think that momentum that they had in the MLS's back tournament is going to carry me into this game. And that, you know, for Miami, I know they, of course, got Umtiti, who we do not know, or not Umtiti, Matt Tweedy, that is. I got the wrong French midfielder there, but I know they, of course, got Matt Tweedy on a TAM deal, but again, he's not going to be a guy that's gonna solve the biggest issue that this Inter Miami team currently has, which is goal scoring. And if you don't score against goals, and especially you don't score goals against an Orlando City team that knows how to score goals and know how to defend, yeah, this could be a huge problem for Inter Miami, and hence that's why I think Orlando should be able to win this one. Not only the fact that they have the quality, but Inter Miami is still kind of a bit of an incomplete kind of team, in that I think unless if they can maybe get some goals scored on this team, or if there's a couple of guys on that team can start scoring goals for them, I don't know when exactly they're going to potentially get their first point. But hear me out, Miami fans. You're going to get your first point eventually. Like, I know this has been rough, and this is probably the worst start by any MLS expansion franchise to lose 5 in a row. But things are going to be a lot more promising, knowing the fact that, you know, you just got one of the world's best midfielder just a couple of days ago. And there could be a potential that you could get one of the best forward in the world in the upcoming weeks or months of time, and that they can spend that DP spot on that player that they desperately need in terms of fix their goal scoring problem that this team has. But now moving on into the second to the last game of this week is the Rocky Mountain Cup between the Colorado Rapids and Real Salt Lake. So the Rapids currently have a record of 2-1-2, while RSL currently have a record of 1-3-1. And this game is going to be kicking off at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. Colorado, of course, currently is in 7th in the West, while RSL is currently in 9th and just outside of the playoff spot of the Western Conference. And in the last 5 head-to-head matchup between both of these teams, well, it's been pretty one-sided. And unfortunately for Colorado, yeah, they were not the team that were in favor in terms of this one-sided affair with this Rocky Mountain Cup. As RSL, we already saw earlier during this MLS's back tournament, able to win 2-0 against the Rapids. They were also able to win 2-0 in their prior matchup besides the MLS's back tournament earlier this month, or not earlier this month, but last month exactly. Then it was a 3-2 win in favor of RSL, so I wrote to Colorado there. And then it was a 6-0 rout that RSL gave to Colorado, and that was also the same game that the Rapids actually went down to 9 men to kind of add insult to injuries in terms of the 6-0 loss that they suffered in that game. And that the only game that didn't resort in a win for RSL in the last 5 head-to-head matchup was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams. And knowing the fact that RSL has pretty much owned Colorado, and I thought coming into this tournament, this was probably going to be a turning point where the Rapids are going to finally get one over RSL, and that they definitely have the squad to do it against an RSL team that there was definitely a lot of question about the way that the squad that they have isn't really that good, and that maybe the Rapids can, of course, finally get that elusive wins that they've been looking for in this Rocky Mountain Cup. But no, instead, RSL, of course, won that game. And I'm not going to fall into that trap again by predicting RSL winning this one. Again, Colorado, I think when you look at quality in terms of the squad, they definitely have a much better squad coming into this game against RSL. But again, RSL just have Colorado's number. Like, no matter how much, when you look at these last couple of head-to-head matches in the Rocky Mountain Cup, it doesn't matter if RSL has a strong squad or they have a weaker squad than the Rapids. They always find a way to beat the Colorado Rapids. And this is not just at home that they're winning. They're actually even winning away against Colorado. And I think RSL, despite the fact that they usually don't have a good away record, Colorado is one of those games that RSL always tends to win on the road. So I think this is going to be nothing different, and that I expect RSL to be able to win this game against the Colorado Rapids. But with that being said, now we are into the final game of this weekend, and we close off this so-called Heineken rivalry week with pretty much the granddaddy of them all in terms of MLS rivalry, also known as my best and favorite rivalry in the league. And that, of course, is the Portland Timbers versus the Seattle Sounder and the Cascadia Derby. Now, the Timbers currently have a record of 3-1-1, while the Sounders currently have a record of 2-2-1. And by the way, this game is going to be kicking off at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific on Sunday. Now, an interesting fact that I actually found out is that in this Cascadia Derby, it will really kind of determine who actually will leapfrog each team in terms of leading the series in this Cascadia Derby, because both teams are actually tied with 14 wins and 6 draws against each other in the Cascadia Derby. Now, I know on paper, if you don't look at the history or just look at on paper here, Portland clearly has the advantage because, you know, they of course won the MLS's back tournament and definitely looked very well in that tournament, and many people would think that that momentum that they got in the MLS's back tournament could contribute into this Cascadia Derby, while Seattle, of course, got eliminated by LAFC in the round of 16, and they definitely did not look like good team during that point. And also throughout this tournament, they haven't really looked like a Sounders team that won the MLS Cup back in 2019. But again, since this Cascadia Derby is so competitive, it's kind of hard to predict who exactly is going to win this one. Although the one thing that could help me in terms of predicting this game is that for whatever reason, for the past couple of Cascadia Derby, if you don't include the playoff series, the road team are able to get the victory. Because in the last one, it was a 2-1 away win for Seattle against Portland in the Cascadia Derby, before Portland pretty much returned the flavor against Seattle by winning 2-1 on the road. Then it was a 1-0 win for Seattle over Portland, before it was Portland winning 3-2 against the Seattle Sounders. And the only time when a road team did not win in this Cascadia Derby is the Portland Timbers winning 1-0 against the Seattle Sounders. And you know that with these kind of resort in the last 4 matches, that tells me that I should pick the road team. You would think I, of course, would pick the road team. But instead, I am going to do something that hasn't happened in the Cascadia Derby in a while. And that, of course, is a draw. Because I know for a fact that the Seattle Sounders is going to be up for this game. And they know that it must be very painful to see their hated rival able to win the MLS's back tournament and also win a silverware. So they're definitely going to be up for this game. Whereas the Portland Timbers, yes, they of course won the MLS's back tournament and won some silverware, but is there going to be a letdown now that they are in the regular season again, and that they of course, it's pretty much kind of like a reset in terms of their season of finally winning a silverware, but now they have to go back to the regular season and hope that they could maybe get to the playoffs and win another silverware. Although I will say this, I think the Timbers, when you look at quality wise, they might have a slight edge over the Seattle Sounders. But either way, because of the unpredictability of this Cascadia Derby, and that since both teams seems like they're dead even in terms of wins and draw totals, I have a feeling that is going to be ultimately determined that we're going to once again have to wait for another Cascadia Derby to determine who will have the upper edge in terms of the all-time series, going back to when both team were in MLS. Oh, did I also mention these win totals and draw totals goes all the way back to, well, these win total and draw total only counts toward when both of these teams were in the league at the same time, and it doesn't go all the way back to when both of these teams are in the second division and in the USL level of play. But yeah, this should be a very interesting game, as it always is in a Cascadia Derby. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all of these games? And again, this is kind of like a Heineken rivalry week with all these rivalry that is going on. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of it? And as always, let me know in the comments also for your prediction of these 12 games that's going to be happening in these 4 days between Thursday and Sunday. And what I'm probably going to do with the review is that for the first half of the game, and pretty much for the Friday and Thursday game, I'm going to do the review right after when the final game on Friday is over. And then part 2 of the review for this week is going to be on Sunday, right after the Cascadia Derby between the Portland Timbers and the Seattle Sounders, because doing 12 games review on a Sunday night is definitely not a very pleasant thing to do. I mean, doing 12 games preview is already tough enough, but you know, I kind of want to split it and kind of want to make these video much more easier. And keep in mind, I always don't want to do long videos on my channel, because usually when I do long video on my channel, not a lot of people are going to actually watch the whole video. Although if you did watch the whole video, you know, you're a true supporter of my channel, and I want to thank all your support of this channel for the past couple of years. But yeah, as always, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.